Assume nothing. Question everything. Open your eyes. Challenge the opposition. And start thinking. This is the Thinking Atheist worldwide.
I've gotten so many emails, it is physically impossible for me to go through them all, to read them all. I want to. I really do. Just know that if you send an email regarding this subject to me, even if you don't hear it on the air today, I've read every single one, every word. I promise you that. And I thank you so much for your transparency, for taking the time and sharing your heart, because it's a very difficult subject. But I want you to hang with me. It won't be necessarily the easiest show to listen to, but I'll bet it is one of the most compelling and meaningful hours we have had. Let's start with the words, I'm very sorry for your loss. You'll be in my prayers. You ever notice how empty, how completely powerless those words sound when you say them out loud? I mean, for those of us who have been in the religious circle, we've probably said them. Somebody you know has suffered a terrible tragedy, the death of a loved one. I mean, they're just cloaked in heartbreak. You know, you can see it on their face, you can see it in their body, you can hear it in their voice. Their whole world has been shaken. And so you attempt to alleviate their pain in the only way that you can think of at the moment. You just say it out loud. You go, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm praying for you. A desperate attempt to heal, you know, and you say it, and the words just seem to deflate like a balloon the second they come out of your mouth. No matter how much you mean it. And you do mean it. I mean, you mean it with all your heart. I'm so very sorry. If there's anything you need every day or night, here's my phone number. You call me. I'll be right here. Don't you hesitate. I'm right here. It's no trouble. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And your heart just sinks because you know, despite the overwhelming grief these people are experiencing, they don't want to impose on somebody else, even in their darkest hour. They don't want to be a burden. So they're just going to function, probably on autopilot. They buy the groceries and they get the mail and they plan the funeral arrangements for whoever they lost, and they get up out of bed and they make breakfast and they put one foot in front of the other. They breathe in, they breathe out. They just get through it. Have you ever noticed that in the middle of an extreme loss like that, the death of a loved one, something like that, people sort of retreat into themselves? Have you noticed that? Maybe you've experienced it. Maybe it's a defense mechanism. True story, I went to a private Christian school. My history teacher's name was Glenda. Now, we didn't call her Glenda because we were students. You didn't call the teachers by their first name. It was only after I graduated and knew her as an adult that I was able to address her on a first-name basis, and that's how I will refer to her here, Glenda. She had a husband in the military. She had two great kids. We all went to the same school, a small private school, a Christian school. Now, they were a lot younger than I was. Glenda's oldest child, a daughter, Christy, didn't even graduate till like 5 years after I was already out of school. But it was a very small school, and because my graduating class, we had 20 students. We were small, and the campus wasn't big, and Christy was the teacher's kid, and so she was around. Even though she was a lot younger, we saw her. I saw her face, you know. I knew who she was. Typical. Squeaky clean, straight A, role model kid. You know those types. We've all been to school with them. Maybe you've been one. You know, the type when they get a B, they freak out. They failed. I got a B. You know, you don't know whether to slap them or adopt them. You know, that's what Christy was like. You know, she had that pure skin and the big eyes and just, God, you gotta be kidding me. They seemed really together as a family. I don't know if that has to do with, you know, the fact that they were very conservative, very reserved, whether it was the, you know, having a dad who was a military guy. I don't know, but they just seemed to really be together, you know, very together. And they all seemed happy, very, very happy. Christy was 23. She was in a car accident. Apparently her car had slipped on some ice. The car fell over an embankment. She was killed. It happened on January the 15th, 1997. I got the news on the phone. I mean, somebody called me up. And we've all had these conversations. You know, hey, did you hear the news? Did you hear what happened? Glenda's daughter died. Christy's dead. Yeah, it was a car accident. No, yeah, she was like, what, 23, 24 years old? I don't know. Yeah. Funeral's going to be over at First Baptist Church. You going to go? Yeah, I think I'm going to go too. Can't believe it. I can't believe it. No, I mean, I didn't know Christy all that well. I didn't know her that well. I mean, she was in 6th or 7th grade. I was a senior. I mean, her mom was my history teacher, for Pete's sake. It's crazy. It's tragic. It's tragic. I don't really remember a whole lot about the actual funeral. There were a few key things that really do stick in my mind. First of all, the place was packed, and I think that has to do with the fact that it was a small school. We were a community. We were a family. You know, we were tight. So, you know, it was everybody took it personally, and the church was wall-to-wall people. I vividly remember it. I don't remember anything the pastor said outside of those vague notions of comfort that all pastors give at a funeral. I do know that he broke down right in the middle of the sermon. He started crying. I mean, that was heavy. You know, that was heavy. Mostly, though, I remember that catch in my throat. You know, that feeling when you're at a funeral or you're at some sort of a memorial, and you're sitting there and you feel it. I mean, you feel that tangible catch in your throat. It's emotion, it's pain, it's anger, it's confusion, it's, I don't know, it's just there. You're conscious of it, and you just think, you know, if I allow that catch to be anything more, you know, if I crack, if I shed that first tear, if I let it go, it's over. I'm just going to start sobbing, you know. So you focus on the catch right there. You force it back down. You sort of pull into yourself. You don't move much. Physically, you don't move much. You don't look around much. You don't look people in the eye, certainly. You just sort of deal until the funeral service is over. I really remember that feeling. And I think I had it not because I really knew Christy very well, but it was because one of our own had been taken, and I was totally struck by the waste of this beautiful young woman, totally struck down before her life had really begun. It was the end of the service, and Glenda and her family stood at the front of the sanctuary right next to Christy's open casket. And everybody got in line. We all stood around the kind of the perimeter of the sanctuary to take one last look at Christy, and then to also, of course, offer condolences to the family. And so we're all walking through, and it took a while. I mean, there were so many people. And everybody's saying, you know, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for your loss. If you need anything, you call me. I love you. I love you. We love your family. We're all hugging, you know. I remember vividly what I said to Glenda. I remember it perfectly. I said, you'll be in my prayers. I said the words, and it just seemed totally inadequate. Totally inadequate. I had nothing. I had no idea what to do for this woman. Standing there next to the body of her daughter, what am I supposed to say? There's nothing I can do. You know, she was standing right there in front of me. It's funny because I noticed in a tangible way she wasn't really there. You know, in the shadow of this unimaginable grief, the sudden terrible death of a daughter, of a child, a life cut down before it was really truly lived, the knowledge that Christy would never, ever experience so many things. Wearing the wedding dress, falling in love, sharing her life with a loving husband, buying a home, becoming a mom, becoming a grandmother, having a career, realizing her dreams, creating her own fingerprint on this earth as an adult would never happen. And Glenda stood right there next to her daughter's casket, and she was just performing the gestures, you know, one foot in front of the other, one word after the other, total survival mode. Like she had just retreated into that deep place. She'd kind of checked out. She was doing what was required. She was enduring the unendurable, and person after person after person walked by and said, I love you. I'm so sorry. You're in my prayers. She's in a better place now. Now, I think about Glenda from time to time. You know, she's apparently a counselor now. She's not a grief counselor, but I think she functions in some kind of a counseling role. And I wonder, you know, is that transition from teacher to counselor part of her recovery? Maybe that's how she dealt Maybe that's part of her solution. I wonder if Christy's death just shook her faith. Did it rattle her belief in God? I wonder that. I mean, it has to take a parent to the brink where they question everything. Or did she just use the idea of a future reunion in heaven to survive, to get through this life? Now, I can see the attraction. Pastors at funerals, they say this stuff all the time. We've all heard it. This isn't goodbye. This separation is temporary. Right now, she's in a place where there's no pain, no heartache, no suffering, no loss, no sickness, no death. And one day when you enter heaven, she's going to be right there waiting to greet you, to welcome you, to put her arms around you. And until that day, just know she's right up there looking down, smiling on you. She's right there. And as you move forward from this tremendously difficult day, I know that God will fill your heart with His love. And He'll heal the pain you feel. And He'll remind you that He has everything in control. That He loves you and your family. And He loves Christy more than anything. And then God uses all circumstances for His good. Know that Jesus loves you and I love you. And know that you'll be in my prayers. Fast forward 14 years to this very moment right now. I look at that whole experience apart from my former belief system as a Christian. I look at Christy's tragic death without the concept of heaven or God or divine comfort. Are all things working together for good to those who love God and who are called according to His purpose, Romans 8:28. I totally understand why people would cling to their faith, why they hold desperately to the idea that we'll all be together again. Somehow God's going to make sense of the senselessness. 2 Corinthians 4:17, for our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. I'm sure families everywhere try to figure out how the violent death of a 23-year-old girl qualifies as light and momentary troubles, but that's the excuse I hear. And I get it. And it raises the question, those of us who have rejected the idea of God, who don't believe in the afterlife, who don't see a greater divine plan in motion, we don't have that glue, that balm. We don't have that coping mechanism. How do we give and receive comfort when tragedies like these happen in our own lives? How have we gone beyond or around, quoting scripture verses and saying useless prayers to give the grieving something else, something real, something tangible? How have we in our own lives coped with unthinkable tragedy? The death of a loved one or another life-shaking event from which recovery just seems impossible. That's what today's show is. It's a conversation where we explore grief and grieving without God. If you have an opinion, a story, a life experience, something to contribute, I would love to hear from you. And you'll see the number on the top of the switchboard. I don't have Shelley on the phone, so I will refer to you by area code. On the line with me first is a woman who has had first-hand experience with incredible tragedy outside the cloak of religion or prayers or heaven or God. She's kind enough to join me and tell her story. Her name is Lee. Good morning, Lee.
Good morning, Seth. Thank you for having me.
This is a hard show to have because I think about the weight that you must carry. And I think about all of the things that you've gone through in your journey. And I just want to crawl through the internet phone line and just wrap my arms around you. I just think what an incredible woman you are to be able to have come out the other end. Very quickly, for my listeners, would you tell your story? Tell us what you've been through and what happened, okay?
Sure. And excuse me if I get a little emotional listening to your stories, or kind of choking me up. But
it was, this what this is a show about. Be real, and I'm good. So just let's go for it, okay?
I guess I should start. My husband and I, we had the typical modern day romance. We met online, and we married several years later. And about 7 years ago, we decided to try to have children, and we knew that I was going to have to be on fertility drugs, and we knew it was going to be a long road. It took us 6 years to finally become pregnant, and last year in January, on my birthday, January 15th, we found out that I was pregnant, and several weeks later, at the first ultrasound, we found out we were actually having twins. And that was very exciting and scary at the same time. We were in shock for a little while. But everything went great. Things were going wonderfully. And I developed gestational diabetes, so I was considered high risk. And so, plus having twins, it was high risk. So I was monitored very closely, and every few weeks we would have ultrasounds to make sure the babies were growing proportionately and everything was fine. And then at 19 weeks, I had my formal ultrasound, which is when you typically find out the sexes of the babies. They measure them. They measure everything. They look at their kidneys, their hearts. And during that process, we found out that I was having cervical issues, and my cervix was shortening. And typically, they want your cervix to be 3 centimeters or longer to be normal. Well, mine measured 2.5 centimeters. And they said, no big deal, but we're going to have to put you on modified bed rest and just take it easy. Pretty much if you can lay down, just lay down. If you can sit. Don't go jogging. And we'll monitor you very closely. And if anything changes, if you feel any changes or see any changes, come in. Several days later, I noticed what I thought was abnormal discharge, and so I went straight to the hospital because they told me if I seen anything different to go. I went into the hospital. They measured my cervix, and now it was 1.5 centimeters. Excuse me. So that was very bad because at that point in a normal pregnancy, they would do a rescue cerclage, which is a stitch where they would just stitch your cervix shut to try and hold the babies in. But with twin pregnancies, it was shown that there was more danger in doing it at that point to the babies than just laying on bed rest, being on bed rest for the rest of the pregnancy. So I was about 20 weeks at that point, and I spent 3 days in the hospital. I came home on strict bed rest, and my cervix remained at 1.5 centimeters for 2 weeks. They monitored me every week, and then in my 22nd week, I began having contractions. And so, of course, I went to the hospital, and we found out that I was dilated to 4 centimeters, and, baby A, which was the lower baby, her bag was bulging out, and so there's basically no hope at that point. I was too early to give medication to stop contractions, and since I was already dilated to 4, it would have done no good. So I spent the next, about 14 hours in labor, and I eventually gave birth. They were born about 3 hours apart, and of course they didn't survive. They had come in and asked us if, they told us our chances, the babies were 22 weeks and 3 days, and, the chance of them surviving was 1 to 8%, and the chance of them surviving without any sort of debilitating issues for the rest of their life was 0. And I already knew at 22 weeks I was going to take no drastic measures. There was no life-saving measures. And I told the doctor that, or we told the doctor that, and, obviously they said that we think that's a good decision. And so when the babies were delivered, they were handed to me, and they did no life-saving measures. And so I just couldn't put them through that for no reason. It just didn't make any sense to me. And that was the worst day of my life. So
tell me, were you an atheist at this moment? Was there any God in the equation for you at this time?
There was not, but let me tell you, I've been a non-believer my entire life. I was never indoctrinated. There was no, I think my mom, growing up, sort of believed in God. I went to Sunday school until I was 7 when my parents were divorced and we stopped going to church. I remember maybe 2 classes of Sunday school, and we just never grew up to speaking about it, really. And so I never had that. I always never believed. I always wondered, what people were talking about. And, of course, I learned, obviously, about Jesus, the Bible. I even sat down and tried to read the Bible myself. And as a non-believer, it really made no sense to me. So I already came from that place of non-belief, but the hospital I went to was a Catholic hospital, and they did tell me, had I been a few days further along at 23 weeks, they would have tried to save the babies no matter what I said, which angered me beyond belief, because 24 weeks is considered viability age, and then you're still looking at severe issues, health issues with the babies at that point. Some people are lucky. In 24 weeks, their babies turn out fine, but the likelihood of that is very small. But at 23 weeks, that hospital told me they would have tried to save my baby's life, and that makes me so mad. And of course, the nurse at one point asked if I wanted to call in a pastor or a priest or anybody, and I looked straight at her. I said, "No, we're atheists, thank you." And she just kind of looked at me like shock on her face, and, she was very good about it, but the look on her face was just, I thought to myself, am I the only person who's ever said that?
Are you better or worse, though, without the concept of God? Or did it help or hurt when it came to the healing in your own heart?
Oh, I truly believe I'm much better off, because I've had to deal with reality. I've had no other choice. I've had to look it in the face and heal. I have no concept of seeing my girls, in an afterlife. I don't hang on to that. I don't every single day think I just have to get through one more day because one day I'm going to see them again. I realize I'm not. They are gone. And I have had to move on and heal with that in my face, and that has made me that much stronger. That's how I feel. And, I have, through this journey, I have met many baby lost mothers, and most of them are Christian. And I see their, some of them are on my Facebook, some of them are on my blog, some of them, I have emails to, and we speak, and I watch them every day make comments about, I hope my babies are having fun on this Valentine's Day, and they're receiving lots of candy, and I can't wait to see you again, baby boy. And my heart breaks for them, because I feel like, and many of these mothers have lost, I lost my children last June, and many of these mothers, it's years have gone by, and I think, wow. And there's no judgment here, because if there's any time you're going to lose it, it's going to be when you lose a child. And people deal with grief differently, but I think to myself, my goodness, if they could just live in the now and heal and be whole and, just put their feet in reality, they could move on so much quicker. And the grief will always be there. I will deal with this every day of my life. It will not, it does, time passes and things get better, life moves on, because I do live in reality. But it doesn't diminish my grief. I will always grieve for my babies. And
Lee,
the idea of them, yes.
Do people ever say this was God's will, God called them home, God's timing is not our timing? Have they ever done those type of things and spoken to you in that way? And what is your response?
All the time. One of the comments I remember first was, God must have needed more angels, so he took your babies. and I believe this was on my Facebook, and another friend of mine spoke up and said, well, that doesn't make any sense, because what better place for a baby than in her mother's arms? And I was just so thankful that, I didn't have to respond to that. But it made so much sense, because I thought, well, you've got that right. What better place is there for them than in my arms? And I heard, of course, I'm praying for you. And I was so, I'm never rude. I was always thankful, and 'cause I understand the sentiment. I know where they're coming from, as far as they feel helpless. They don't know what to do, and that's their belief system, And that's what they think is the best thing they can do for me. I've learned since then that I need to ask for what I need. And so people have, we're going to pray for you. Oh, we're so sorry. And I said, thank you, but what I really need right now is a hug, Or could you come over and spend some time with me? I need you to call me, And some people have responded to that, and others still, don't know how to handle. And I'm speaking of very close people to me, not strangers. I'm speaking of, friends and family that I've known my whole life, and they still don't know how to. And, that's understandable, because if you haven't experienced it, what do you say to somebody?
Lee has chronicled her journey on a website that I want you to tell everybody here about, because it talks about, what are your babies' names?
Sky was born first, and Peyton was baby B.
And the website is what?
Is livingwithoutthem.com.
Livingwithoutthem.com. And it is,
yes.
What, a journal, a blog of your personal journey through the entire ordeal, and do you also address the process of your healing in the wake of that tragedy? Do you talk about that?
I do. If you go there and you click on the why, as to why I started this, you'll see, and it's a very raw, emotional blog. I mean, I put it all out there, and I do speak about how I coped, and many of my coping techniques were, the first thing we did was we left the state. 4 days after my babies were born, we had to leave, because I couldn't sit here with the cards coming in and the people just not knowing what to say to me, and we left. And I understand that opportunity is not there for a lot of people, but we did it, and we went out east. I'm from Michigan, and we went out east, and we spent 2 weeks just being together and grieving. And my husband had an idea about writing a diary to the girls, and I've chronicled that on the blog. I put it all out there, and I said, I didn't write it to them thinking that they were going to hear me and feel me out there somewhere. I wrote it for myself. All the thoughts everything I ever wanted to tell them, all the feelings we were having, and that was the beginning of my healing process. Every single day on that trip, I wrote to them, and I stopped on the last night that we were gone. And I came back. I started the blog. At the hospital, they gave me a grief box, basically, with, they took their pictures, they put little hats, and they wrapped them in blankets, and there was a basket of other grieving parents had put together that they gave us with some nice things in it. Many of them were religious. So I decided I was going to knit hats and blankets for babies as tiny as mine were and donate them to the hospital. And I also created memory bracelets to put in those grieving baskets that had nothing to do with religion. And, I collected donations to that program for the hospital because it helped me so much. I wanted to help other mothers. I went on a walk because October is like National Pregnancy and Infant Loss. And so there's walks all over the country on certain days in October, and I found one that was near me. And while I wanted to do that to honor my babies and hopefully meet other mothers, it was put on by an extremely religious organization, and I found myself more angry than anything because we went to the cemetery, and, of course, they had people speaking, and it was more like they were trying to convert everybody, it felt like to me. It just made me angry because I didn't want to hear all that. I just wanted to honor my babies. So I don't think
I think your journey
again.
will help a lot of people, Lee, though. I think livingwithoutthem.com is the website. If you know someone and you're listening who is going through a grieving process, or you're curious about Lee's story, it'll touch you. I mean, that's why I called Lee to begin with. I sent you an email out of the blue, and I said, oh, my God, can we talk? Can we talk? And you've been amazing to come here. And I have to congratulate you because you told me over the phone that you are now expecting again. So congratulations.
Yes. Thank you. I'm actually in the 22nd week with twin girls again. So
I love it. Yeah. And I'm so glad that there's a tough, brassy, smart, brave, just well-rounded, free-thinking woman out there who is bringing children into the world, who is living her truth. I don't know you, but just from talking to you, my first concern obviously would be that I know many grieving parents are chained to the memory of their children. You know, the bedrooms of the children never change. Their pictures are like a shrine. They talk about them nonstop to the point where it's almost an obsession, where they never really get a chance to move on and live their own lives. But just from speaking to you, it just sounds like you're dealing. You're moving forward, and I just want to say how much I appreciate you telling your story and sharing that and telling everybody else that it's okay to be an atheist, to be a non-believer in God, and it is possible to survive tragedy.
Yes.
And tell me again the website name.
livingwithoutthem.com.
Lee, I got to move on, but I appreciate you very much. And I encourage all of our listeners, I mean, there are going to be thousands of people listening to this, go and send her an email and tell her how much she has meant to you, because I tell you, you give me goosebumps, girl. It's just amazing.
Thank you, Seth. Thank you for this opportunity.
It's a pleasure, Lee. We'll talk soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
I had an email from Steve. He said, my reaction is usually similar to the very famous reaction Pat Tillman's brother had. Nothing pisses me off more than when people say, he's in a better place now. It's God's will. Really? It's God's will my stepfather dropped dead of a heart attack right in front of my mother. It's God's will that 3 of my friends in high school were killed by a drunk driver on their way to a basketball game. And what better place? I think that in some sense, the amount of grief suffered when a loved one dies, I can't stand euphemisms like pass on, he says, is substantially bigger for atheists. At least theists have some sort of solace in their idea that somehow a person is still living. I would love to believe that there's something more after this, but to do so would be to lie to myself. I think a good way to cope is to keep the memories of the dead fresh and to remind ourselves who they were, try to live up to what they would want us to be, and to carry on without them. Let's go to the phones. I've got an area code 517. Hi, who's this?
Hi, this is Tankins.
I'm so glad you're calling, Tankins. What's going on?
First off, that woman that just called, I had a chance to look at her website, and it is very touching, and I think everyone should check it out. But anyway, yeah, back in 2005, I went through some stuff. I was on a lot of drugs, and I developed a heart condition. I was 21, and it caused my liver and kidneys to fail, and and my heart, and I had a stroke, and they never expected me to come back or anything. I was in a coma for 3 weeks, don't remember a lot. I was hallucinating and everything, and I woke up very confused, and there were a lot of people saying, miracle, it's a miracle, it's a miracle, this and that and the other thing, and asking me like, oh, did you see the white light or whatever, because you almost died and stuff like that. And I'm thinking like, Jesus Christ, I just found out that I've got all this heart damage, and I'm gonna have to take pills forever, and they're talking about all this other, and they're asking me about like what happened, and talking about it as like a teachable, preachable moment, or I forget what they said, but you know what I'm talking about, the saying that using it as an opportunity to reinstill your faith or whatever. And I woke up and I was just like, I was an atheist before, and I was like, well, if I don't find God now, it's never going to happen, and that's true. But I think with all of the support, I mean, I did get a lot of support. Don't get me wrong, there were plenty of people, but I got some that were religious and trying to tell me like, oh, maybe you should go to church now because maybe God wants you around and all this, and that is the incident that really solidified this in my mind, that I was just thinking, my tragedy is not your soapbox, and I give people the same courtesy. Last year, we lost a couple of people. And one of them was a 10-year-old girl, dropped dead of an aneurysm, and we're going to the funeral and everything, just out of the blue, sad. And people are already saying the same things, like God must have needed her, and it was, the same thing the last woman was saying, stuff that I would be offended if someone said that to me too. When I go to these things, and I have to go to funerals that are tragic, unexpected, and sad, I keep my mouth shut, and it doesn't mean I'm not an atheist, it doesn't mean I don't believe what I believe, it just doesn't feel like the time at all.
I think that's a poster, man. My tragedy isn't your soapbox. I don't think I could have summed that up any better. My tragedy is not your soapbox. Tankins, I got to move on, but I'm glad you called. Thanks so much for being a part of the show today.
Yeah, nice talking to you. Thanks.
All right, take care of yourself, brother. Let's talk to area code 347. Hi, who's this?
My name is Stephanie. I'm from New York.
Hi, Stephanie. All right, what is your perspective on grief without God? Do you have a story or an opinion on the subject?
Yeah, I have a story with an opinion. When I was about 18 years old, my mom died, and it was very sudden. Like, one day she was in the hospital, and, maybe 5 days later or so, she passed away. And at the time, I was religious, but her death just sort of, kicked it out of me. And she had a religious funeral, and it was always the same things. She's in a better place now with her time, yada, yada, yada. And there's something else that keeps being mentioned, but I can't remember it at the moment. And because of, the whole shock of it, and from everything I went through, I just said to myself, I was like, I can't hide myself in my religion. I know somebody who does that. They use their religion as a shield from their pain, but if you pay attention to them, you see that they're hurting so much more than if they just sort of accepted that this is what happened. And that was what happened. My mom passed away 4 years ago. And
it's funny, I think, if people are coping with God, they're not really coping, are they? I mean, they're not really dealing.
That's how I feel. They're just sort of hiding the pain away, and it's not, you'll never really be able to move on with your life because you're just stuck in this whole, well, God will make it better, or I'm going to be with them again one day because of God, instead of just doing somebody, I think not sure if it was you, the previous caller, that said something to live up to what they would want you to do. You know, my mom wanted me to succeed and graduate from college and all these things and make my life better than what her life was. And that's what I'm doing.
4 years is not a long time. How you doing, Stephanie? You all right?
I don't know. I try not to think about it, I guess, because every time I do, it just sort of I don't know, it still really hurts. It's still you can't take that away. Like you said in the beginning, I sit there thinking of all the things my mom will never know. She'll never see me graduate from college. She didn't see me graduate from high school. I mean, I got my GED, but I still had a graduation. And that hurts, not being able to share those things with her.
Yeah, but you're her legacy. I mean, it sounds cliche, but the truth is that, it sounds so cliche, but I mean, a piece of her continues. Every success you have, every road you take, everything you do, every person you meet, every friendship you have, every success story in your life is really speaks to her and the foundation she laid for you. So I'm no expert on the subject, but if you find yourself in one of those valleys where you feel really dark and alone, just understand that everything that you do and are and become and succeed in, everything is really sort of a testament to how much of an input, how much of a foundation she laid for you. And honestly, I hope the rest of your life is a wonderful, happy, fulfilled, and free-thinking life, Stephanie. And I'm glad you shared your story. Thanks so much for being so transparent in front of all these people. It's a brave thing to do, and it means a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Let's talk to area code 270. Hi, you're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Who is this?
Are you talking to me?
I'm talking to you. What's your name?
I'm sorry, Sally.
Hi, Sally. Thanks for calling the podcast. Kind of a tough subject today, but I think one that we can all get something out of. What's your take on grief without God?
My husband and I lost our only child 4 years ago. He was 30. I am like you. I was a fundamentalist Christian for a lot of my adult life. I deconverted in about 15 years ago, and my husband right around the same time. And our son was it never took with him. He was made out of Teflon.
Wait, now, so you lost your faith before he was killed?
Before he died, yes. And the thing that was so horrific for us as atheists was that we had a largely religious extended family. Everybody. My family is all just deeply, devoutly religious, and my husband's are pretty close to that. And they all saw this death as, we've prayed and prayed, and now God is going to bring them back. They reacted exactly the way your parents would if it happened to you. If something, they would see it as, oh, God is working in their lives, and now they're going to come back to Jesus. And I come from the eternal security, once saved, always saved school of thought, and
were you
so
a Baptist or
independent, but
sure.
Non-denominational, but essentially yes.
Okay.
But this has given them a lot of cognitive dissonance ever since I deconverted, because they know I was saved. So if I was saved and I left, then what does that say about them?
As an atheist, how do you deal with the death of a child? How did you cope? What'd you do?
I don't know how. Well, you deal a lot better than the religious folks do. I don't know if I could. Our son was a very locally well-known musician. He was singer-songwriter, had an extensive following, and so when he died, we lived many miles away, and we had to fly in, and when we got there, the first thing that happened to us coming off the airplane was that the local news media was there wanting to talk to us. So we were kind of in the spotlight from the beginning, but and as a result, we ended up having to have 4 separate funerals, and in 2 different states and several different cities.
Well, that'll tear your heart out.
That was tough, but we did it. We had all his funerals, all his memorials. They weren't funerals. We had them at local bars where he played, and we grieved for him in the environment that he was most familiar in, and I was overwhelmed by the support of his friends. That's who it was for. It was for the people who loved him, and they were just thrilled. I mean, not that he died, but the way we did it. What we did do was let them design what we did, and what we basically did was have people, we had an open mic, and people could sing or play his music or play other songs or read a poem and do anything they wanted to. And no one in my family would come except my mother, and the only reason she came was because I made her, and she only came to one. And other than that, no one came at all.
A memorial at a bar. I kind of hope they serve alcohol at my service.
It was great. It was great.
Everybody...
I mean, we had, and several people. I was worried that the whole bar they would all get drunk, and people, because they were upset. I mean, these people. This was a life-changing event for a lot of them. He was only 30, and he. But anyway, in the aftermath of all this, we went to all these funerals, and then I began to redo his website. He left behind 3 or 4 CDs and lots of music and an uncompleted CD. Since then, North Carolina filmmakers made a movie about him, and so there's been some stuff going on, and all of that, dealing with the website and handling everything, has gave me an outlet. But what I found really interesting was how it just completely fractured our family. We were on the edge with our extended family because of our deconversion, but this death just did it.
To quote our good friend Tenkins, your tragedy became their soapbox.
Yes, and they just began. I found too something very interesting in it, and that is that the people who coped the best, the people who were best able to reach out to me, to be my friend and comfort me, were the other atheists. The Christians didn't have a clue. See, the problem they have is that when Nathan died, they couldn't come to me and say he's in a better place. He wasn't a Christian. So what are they supposed to say? They don't know what to say. So they just don't say anything, and they go away and be just as quiet as they possibly can because, oh, my God. what am I supposed to say to this woman? And they find death I found that they find death very uncomfortable to deal with. They don't seem to be able, nobody I knew who was a Christian was able to just really face it head on and stare it in the face. And you have to, in order to, I just wonder if people who are Christian that lose a child like that, and I'll assure you there's nothing more horrific, but I wonder if they're all just not a little emotionally screwed up afterwards because
I get that. You know, I think you totally hit it. I think that religion, belief in God, religion, spirituality, whatever, for a great many people is a way for them to deal with the fact that they're terrified of dying. They talk about heaven. They talk about eternal bliss and comfort and reunion. We'll all stand at the foot of Jesus and sing songs, and it's all going to be pearly gates and mansions. But in their core, in the place they don't talk about, I think the religious mindset is terrified of death.
They find it just something extremely uncomfortable, and they don't want to talk about it. One woman came up to me afterwards, and she walked, I hadn't seen her since Nathan died and since we'd gotten back home, and she came up to me and hugged me, and then she said, "Oh, thank goodness that's over," meaning greeting me. Was so uncomfortable for her. She was glad to get it out of the way. And I had many of them say to me things like, you need to get over it and move on. And, I mean, he'd been dead, 6 weeks. You don't move on that fast, believe me.
No kidding. I'm of the mindset, some people say that hard times build character. I'm of the mindset that difficult times reveal character. I think it's when the chips are down that you find out what people are really like. Sally, I'm afraid I got to move on, but I'm so glad that you called. I mean, you have an amazing story. I'm so sorry to hear about Nathan, but honestly, you're a terrific lady. I think a lot of people will be inspired by the fact that you were able to honor this man, his life, to give his friends a proper way, not a superstitious way, but a real tangible way for them to say goodbye. That's a brilliant idea. I think I'm going to probably steal it.
You're more than welcome to. It's the new way to have an atheist funeral. Do it in the
I love it. Thank you, Sally, so much.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Sally's story mirrors one of another letter I received from Kate. She said, I had to respond to this because it was the day I learned to grieve without God that I realized I was truly an atheist. I'd been lied to, and I'd been steeped in the Southern Baptist Church my whole Midwestern life. I, like any good girl would do, ignored science and logic Instead, I took the cosmic vending machine explanation. I was 29 years old when I began learning science and biology. 29. That year, my husband's grandfather passed, and we had to make the trip to Tulsa for the services. This was to be the first time I entered a church. Since realizing the absolute absurdity of it all, I shook, my palms sweated, and they went through the usual God and his time stuff while I sat with my atheist husband, and I mourned the loss of my religion, my belief, and a whole new life waiting for me on the other side. I felt real grief for the first time, not some elaborate blame game. I mean, I understood why I was sad. I found in that moment that death was no longer a fear of mine, just a natural state of being. By believing we returned to non-existence, I had gotten rid of the terrible fear and the guilt that had plagued me my whole life. Since that day, grief has become a personal sadness to be worked through. I'm sad that the life is gone. I'm sad because I missed him. Ultimately, I realized that this life is all I have, and sadness is made to be overcome. You get on with life because you never know when your intricate body will throw you into non-existence, and it's better to have lived to the fullest. Thank you, Kate. Wise words. Let's talk to area code 516. Hi, you're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Who's this?
Wesley.
Wesley, what do you got for me today?
My actual story isn't about me. It's actually about my aunt. Her husband's name was Ron, and everyone in the family loved him, and everyone in the family was a Lutheran at the time, very religious. And, let's see, they get married, and fast forward 5 or so years, and he's diagnosed with a terminal disease. Everyone prays for his recovery, and I mean everyone, my parents, my grandparents, the whole extended family. And my grandfather, who is basically the religious patriarch of our family, he's a pastor today, he comes up to everyone and he says, "I've had a dream. The Lord spoke to me and he said that Ron will be healed of his sickness." And this gave everyone so much hope because they knew that Ron would be healed. Ron did die, unfortunately. It's terrible, but for some of the family members, it brought them closer together. My aunt, I think religion is what really helped her through it because she was able to think that her husband was in heaven. But as for my parents, they just had this moment where Ron was a really great guy, and we all loved him, and everyone we knew prayed for his good health, but he died anyway. That's where my parents became atheists. And,
your parents deconverted after Ron's death?
Yep. My mom is a full-on atheist, and my dad is more of a, spiritual atheist, but, yeah, he's not into it anymore.
What's a spiritual atheist? What do you mean by that?
Well, it's the best way I can think of to call it, but my dad likes to study other religions and learn their philosophies, and I don't know, I don't think you could call us actual atheists because we do go to church, but we're Unitarian Universalists. So
you probably go mostly for the community, don't you? You go to connect with other people, and I think that's why a lot of the people inside the Unitarian Church attend is because they get a chance to sort of be family. I totally get that. I'm really sorry to hear about Ron's death. I really am. But, honestly, it sounds like, it sounds like many in your family may have come to a point, a life-changing point, where they're starting to critically analyze their own belief system, their own worldview, and maybe something good is coming out of it. I got to move on, Wesley. Thank you so much for a great call. I appreciate it very much.
Thanks for the time.
I got an email from Carm. Says, several years ago, a dear friend of my husband, who was a university professor emeritus, died, and there was a memorial service for him. Ed was not an outspoken atheist, but he and his wife did not practice any religion. He and his wife were brilliant academics and musicians, and they just didn't buy into the supernatural. This was the first memorial I'd ever been to where God was absent. In fact, the chaplain from hospice, who was religious, who led the service, stated that he was instructed very specifically not to make it about anything but Ed and his life. That's what his memorial was, the life and times of an extraordinary man. His colleagues and fellow musicians, they all got up and recalled their fond memories of how he had enriched their lives. It was the most meaningful and appropriate memorial service I've ever been privileged to attend. My husband said, "This is what I want when I'm gone." There's comfort in the reality that we are finite beings. Immortality comes from the things we teach each other and how we love each other. Death does not have to be contaminated by magical thinking, tales of the supernatural, and the fear that perhaps a loved one was not in God's good graces. Death is a natural process that is finally being demystified. Grief is a real emotion, which isn't helped by believing in heaven and angels. Your loved one is still gone, separated by death, and with us only in memory. Thank you, Carm, for the email. I've got 713 on my switchboard. Hi, you're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. What's your name?
Ashley.
Hi, Ashley. What do you have for us this morning?
Hey, wow, I can't believe I actually got on here.
I'm so glad you called. I appreciate it very much. What's up?
Well, it's just, I thought this was a perfect one for me to call in on because, for me, I've always been, someone who have to go through the grieving process a lot in my life. And being from such a religious family, everyone's always harping on me because, I'm an atheist and I'm pretty much the only one in my family who is. I'm 18, still very young. So it's first thing I thought of when I saw this one was, when I was a sophomore in high school, I was just 15. I was diagnosed with epilepsy, and what sucked the most, I felt like I was going through my own depression and self-pity about this. And then my mom puts me out in the entire church over it because she makes me go to church. And she pretty much says, pray for me and my daughter. She's been diagnosed with epilepsy, and she's feeling just help us through this. And I remember one of the worst experiences I've ever been through. I walked out of there crying because everyone's going up to me. I'll pray for you, trying to hug off me. I locked myself in the car.
Did they lay hands on you? I know that's a common thing where they'll all come together and they bring you toward the altar, and everyone either reaches a hand forward or they move into the altar area and they put their hands on you. Did that happen?
Yes, it did. And it pissed me off so bad. And but the thing I hated most, I came outside, allowed myself in the car. The teacher comes outside and knocks on the window. And me being a polite person, I rolled it down. He's like, hey, I heard about what happened. I'd like to pray for you. And I said, no. He's like, what? I'd just like to pray for you. And I continue to tell him no. Reaches his hand into the car and starts praying. And it's like, what the hell? Yes. It's like, feels like spiritual rape right here. Like,
well, they were in your space. I'm sorry. You told them no? And they sort of accosted you and decided they were just going to, spiritually supersede your own wishes? Yeah, that's offensive. I think that's totally offensive and inappropriate.
Exactly. And I just, oh my God, that still gets me to this day. And
how are you doing? How's your health? Are you all right?
Oh, I'm on medicine right now, and I haven't had a seizure in a while.
You know what we call that, don't you? We call that science. We call that medicine.
Yes.
We call that a tangible solution, girl. Well, honestly, I respect you very much, and I'm glad you called to share your story. It's funny. I hesitate to share this. My father's deaf, is almost completely deaf, and when he was growing up and in his young adult years, obviously very immersed in the church, time after time after time, it makes me angry to think about it. They would drag him forward to the altar, and they would do that very thing. They would stick their hands out, and they would lay hands on him, and they would cry, and they would pray, and they'd say, please deliver this deafness from him, restore his hearing. And everybody's going, praise Jesus, praise Jesus. Nothing. Zero. And he went to the hospital, and he had cochlear implants put in his head. He has a computer in his head that helps him hear. And now, at the age of I think he had it done when he was 68. He's 76 now. Now he can hear. He had to sort of learn how to hear again electronically. But now, thanks to science, thanks to the doctors, thanks to an expensive medical procedure, for the first time in decades, he can finally hear. And just to think about him being in that all those services with people all shouting and chanting and praying and crying and essentially violating him. Despite all that, it was science and human hands and knowledge that made the difference, just like it did for you. And I'm happy for you. I'm glad you found some solutions, and I'm so glad you called today. I appreciate you very much.
Thank you so much.
Take care. That's a hard story to tell. I'm sorry. It's talk about a catch in your throat. It just makes my blood boil to think about it. And you know what? In their minds, they're doing what they're challenged to do. They're true believers. They thought they were helping. It's hard to be angry with that, I guess. I mean, it's hard to be angry with their intention. Let's talk to 678. Hi, you're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Thank you so much for calling. Who's this?
Hey, friend. How you doing? My name's Robert. I'm a measure of faith in your chat room. What's your name?
I'm Seth.
Hey, Seth. Hey, you touched on some really valid points. I'm a Christian. I was raised Roman Catholic. I'm 40 years old. In my mid-40s, I walked away from the Catholic Church when I was about 20, 21, 22, because of the hypocrisy that I saw and because of the practices that just didn't line up with the Scripture.
You don't see that as moving. You don't see it as moving from one hypocrisy to another. I mean, what church are you in now?
I'm not in any church. I have a careful reading of the Scripture will reveal to an individual that what's required is a personal relationship with a God. And I give the guys who are atheists like yourself are actually closer to God than the people who proclaim to be Christians. Because the prerequisite for a nearness to God, draw near to God and God will draw near to you, is keeping the Ten Commandments. And the biggest hurdle and stumbling block for those who call themselves Christians are idols and not honoring the Sabbath. So an atheist who's not attending a church filled with idols is actually closer to God than a professed Christian is who's attending a bricks and mortar building.
Yeah, I don't mean this the wrong way, Robert. But you just sound like 100,000 bullshit apologists that I have to deal with every single month. I mean, you think about everybody is continuing to sort of twist and turn and they've got this tangled web of rules that they may or may not believe in, and what in the Bible is literal and what's not, and blah blah blah. But the truth is, do you believe that the Bible is the perfect and inerrant Word of God?
I believe it's the inspired Word of God. But
what the hell does that mean?
That means that the Holy Spirit, the function of the Holy Spirit is to lead, guide, and teach. What it means, inspired word, is you have a manuscript that's in English now that's been filtered through 3 languages and several versions of English to get to the modern form it's in. There's a lot of vagarity that happens from translating the word. Anyone who goes and takes any Greek manuscript and tries to bring it into English will find it's a very difficult process to communicate with English words the concepts that are in the Greek words.
Robert, I want you to do me a favor, because
go ahead. Sure.
My next podcast is called The Apologist Acrobat. I'm going to be talking specifically about how we interpret the Scriptures, and because I feel that out of respect for my listeners, I want to continue to stay on the subject of grief for the rest of this hour. I want you to email me, editor@thethinkingatheist.com. Just send me, and I'll give you the heads up. I'll send you the show link when it's going to be. And I swear to you, we'll have a respectful forum, and I can have this conversation where we can really take the time to make it what it needs to be. And I really want to hear your point of view. And we can talk about the interpretation of the Scriptures and how you got where you are, and whether or not religion or relationships exist in and out of the church. We can cover all that. But let's do that at another show, which will be the next one on my calendar. Okay, Robert?
Yeah, that's fine. Can I just say one thing quick?
Please do. Please do.
I would love to discuss that with you, because I really feel that you guys as atheists are a little bit closer to God than you know, and than most Christians think that their nearness to God is. You touched on the healing and people praying. If God's not listening, a prayer is never going to be answered, and that's that separation that the professed Christians have with God is the reason why their prayers don't get answered.
Robert, thank you for the call. I appreciate it.
Okay, buddy. Have a great day.
You bet. Let's talk to area code 410. Hi, you're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. What's your name?
My name is Chalice.
Chalice, that's pretty. What do you got for me?
Thank you. I'm not an atheist yet. I'm teetering on the whole subject, but I am dating a man who I am absolutely head over heels with, and he is an atheist. And my whole thing is, I actually have a question for you. I was wondering how, as a non-atheist, how I can comfort him in a time of loss.
Well, this is something I was hoping would come up as we get into the final few minutes of the show here. I honestly believe that when I was a Christian and we would say things like, I'll pray for you, he's in a better place, there is no pain, there is no suffering, to all of those platitudes that we would throw out like Pez, they're just as empty, really did nothing. They were just we were sort of swatting at the air, trying to do something, to say something that mattered. I don't think those things came from a bad place. But I, as an atheist, honestly, if I was looking for comfort, just be there. Don't just shut your mouth. Let me see your face. Let me feel your touch. Hug. Let's spend time together. Just sometimes it's good just to be. I think words so often are so very empty. And if you are at his side and you're not co-opting his tragedy to sort of proclaim your faith. If you were just going to be real and love him with your action, love him with your presence, just be there. I honestly think you will communicate more to him than any words, any scriptures, any prayers would ever do. And that would be my advice. I'm no expert, but that's what I would want. Just be there. Let me know you're there. Let me see your face. Let me feel your touch. It would mean a tremendous amount to me. And I hope that helps you in some way.
There's one more aspect of it. My best friend, who lives all the way out in Cincinnati, Ohio, I'm actually in Maryland, she is an atheist as well. And what happens if she experiences a tragedy and I can't be there physically for her?
Well, I think contact comes in a great many forms. The only caveat I would give, whether you send her a letter, and I wouldn't email it, I would send her a written letter, handwritten letter, by the way.
Of course, no.
Make a phone call. I would just keep your own belief system out of it. And I think it needs to be a celebration of this person's life. When I go, honestly, I want people hanging around going, that's that guy. He was crazy. Remember the time he did this? And everybody tells a story, and then we all laugh, and everybody raises a drink to the sky, and pass the sandwiches. I mean, that's what I want. I don't want people sitting around wearing black with organ music thinking about, oh, God, I'm so depressed. I would like people to review some of the highlights, some of the funny stories, some of the anecdotes, some of the things that people will carry with them. I'd like to live the kind of life that people think he made my life better by being in it, and they would talk about that. And that's what I would do for your friend. I would find the personal things that are to be celebrated about that, the life of the one who died, and I would remind them of those things, put a smile on their face, bring a tear of joy to their eye, touch them in a human way, and I think you will have done more than you will ever have imagined. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the call. Let's talk quickly to 517. Hi, you're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Who's this?
This is Colin. Now, I can't say that I've had a whole lot of loss in my life. I've been very fortunate. Considering I'm 31, I've only lost maybe 4 people. But I've never had a whole lot of trouble with it personally. My grandparents are getting pretty up there in years. And most of my family is very religious, and I have a lot of trouble watching them kind of ignore my grandparents because they're so convinced they'll get to see them in heaven later.
Are they neglecting them in this life because they know they will be reunited in the next? Did I get that right?
Yeah, it seems to be what's going on. They just don't spend a whole lot of time around them. They help them out when they absolutely need to, but more often than not, it's me and my mother who are spending most of our time with them. And, my grandparents are getting pretty lonely from it all. And it just kind of bothers me that nobody wants to spend time around my grandparents.
Well, hopefully you're helping to bridge that gap. Are you connecting at all?
I try, but...
I think that means a lot. Dude, talk's cheap. I think action, extending the olive branch. If you're the heathen, if you're the atheist and you're the one who's making a difference and spending time and making a phone call and writing a letter and bringing lunch, I think that speaks more volumes than anything you could do verbally. And I hope that you have an opportunity there to really show people that we're real people, we experience real joys and real grief, and we have real compassion for each other. I think you have a great opportunity there.
I kind of feel sorry for them because once they are gone, they're going to regret not spending so much time with them. Even if they do have this funny idea in their heads that they'll see them again later.
There's a lesson there. I got to move on. Thank you so much for the call.
Welcome.
Many people say, and I've heard religious people tell me that without God, life's just not worth living. Why bother? Death, you're just gone. There's nothing left. There's no heaven. Why bother living if there's no heaven, if there's no afterlife? And I always respond, it is precisely because there is no heaven that we should maximize every single moment here. Think about, the chance of us existing on this rock, in this solar system, in this galaxy, in this universe, in this vast universe is so unbelievable. And yet here we are. We got one shot. And it's because we reject the idea of an afterlife and heaven and God and superstition that we can and should fully maximize every single second. Say whatever needs to be said. You do whatever needs to be done. Fix whatever needs to be fixed. Say the words that need to be said. Just do it. We have one shot. Make the most of it. I have a full switchboard. There's simply no time left, and I'm so sorry for those who've called in. Please email me your stories because I do want to hear them, and I will read every one. Allow me to finish with a letter from Paula. Paula says, it's been 4 years now, but it feels very recent. I dealt with the loss of my mom. She was a staunch atheist She had no time for religious nonsense. She didn't want any minister talking nonsense over her grave when she died. We ended up having an almost crazy conversation about a week before she died. We didn't know she was going to die, but we knew she was very sick. She had pulmonary fibrosis, and it was getting worse. She coughed constantly and had great difficulty breathing. She seemed to have also come down with pneumonia. And I had gone over to her and Dad's to talk to Mom about going into the hospital, and she refused. I'll just die in there, she said. She was sitting in her favorite chair, wrapped in a blanket, looking exhausted. My dad was lying on the couch. He started saying how we should start to decide what we wanted for Mom's funeral. And she just looked at me and she shook her head and smiled. You'd have to know my dad. He kept insisting the funeral is not for the dead person, it's for the ones left behind. And yes, he was right to a point. Mom and I argued that the dying person has to make their wishes clear, and that way there can be no misunderstandings and arguments later. Dad wanted all 5 of us children to each have some kind of input. I tried to tell him that wouldn't work because he'd get 5 different opinions of what to do. Mom was trying to insist that she wanted it her way, simple. And no public viewing either. I don't want the whole town parading through looking at me while I'm dead. Dad was opposed to that, and he said, well, what if your friends want to see you? Mom replied, well, it's too bad about them. It's my funeral. To which my father replied, what the hell does that matter? You won't be there. Mom and I laughed again. Watching my parents was a great deal like watching a sitcom. Dad had getting annoyed we weren't taking this seriously enough. He said to my mom, Erla, what about your sister? She's religious. She'll be disappointed if there's no prayer. I tried to tell him, it doesn't matter, Dad. The point is you can't please everyone, so you have to please yourself. 2 of my brothers are religious. My sister's agnostic, and I'm an atheist. So you'll never get any kind of consensus as to what should be done, so we should honor what Mom wants. Well, Mom died in the hospital about 10 days after that. My mother and I cried so hard I thought I would die. I held my mom's hand as she passed away in an induced coma. I didn't think I would ever stop crying. In the end, Dad managed to keep most of Mom's wishes, with a lot of prodding from me. One of my brothers did manage to sneak in a prayer, which Dad was not thrilled about. In the weeks to come, I found myself having the worst time dealing with the non-existence of my mother. I was hysterical, and no one could console me but my sister. I kept telling her that it's just like she never lived. She has no memories of how beautiful she was, of dancing to the big band music, of meeting Dad. I was almost inconsolable, and I got answers like, oh, she's looking down on you right now, from extended family. I knew that it wasn't true, or I heard, it doesn't matter if she doesn't remember, we remember. I just wanted someone to understand, someone to get it. I wanted somehow for Mom to know that her life mattered. I spent an hour on the phone explaining to my sister what was bothering me, and she listened, and she got it. And I felt so much better. Sometimes that's all we want is just someone to listen and say, yeah, I understand. Paula finishes her letter. She says, since then, in the ensuing 4 years, I've learned to accept that she doesn't exist. Partly through explaining it to my kids, her grandchildren, I tell them it's just the very same as if she has gone for a long, comforting sleep. And that comforts me as well. And yes, I feel better now knowing that we all do have a type of eternal life. She's become part of the earth, but some of her cells live on in me and my children, and I will too. Sometimes I hear her laugh when I do something silly. I know with all the great memories that I have. Sometimes I can hear her chiding me over my dirty windows. In those ways, I guess we all live on. But it's also much more comforting to me now to know that she can't see or hear us, that she isn't somewhere worrying about us, that her trials are over. I guess if I could finish with any word of encouragement about how we approach life and death and grief and comfort, would be the quote that says this. It says, laugh as much as you breathe and love as long as you live. Good advice. Thanks for listening.